You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good evening, everybody. It's the Reaction Roundtable. I'm your host, Stephen Willis of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We're going to be joined in a second by Josh Guest and maybe Derek Vandegrift if he gets his AirPod situation figured out. We're going to talk about a lot of the news that is sitting out there. Right now, there's a big social media push by people that are always the smartest person in the room, trying to tell all of us that even though Alabama and Ole Miss beat South Carolina deserves their spot in the college football playoffs. And where is that coming from? What is that going to? It's absolutely stupid and it defies logic. But we'll see how it goes. The reality is, and we're going to do a podcast tomorrow, the show tomorrow, that of the teams that are not deserving, like Alabama, like South Carolina, like Miami, that don't really deserve to be in the playoffs, one of those teams, including Ole Miss, is going to make the playoffs. And I talk about why Ole Miss is the best of that 14 pod on tomorrow's podcast. So tune in for that as well. But this is the Reaction Roundtable, and we have a lot of stuff going today. And we have Josh Guest joining us from Super Talk Mississippi, Commodore Media Group as well. Josh, this is weird because the reality of it is, okay, there are 11 teams in this playoff this year that deserve to be in. But this is a 12-team playoff, meaning that one team is going to come from outside that group. And that pod currently is sitting as Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, and Miami. And one of those four teams are going to make the playoffs. There's a massive social media push right now for South Carolina, even though they got beat by 4 scores at home by Ole Miss. And if that game would have been playing 8 quarters, South Carolina wasn't scoring a touchdown on Ole Miss. No. Alabama, which also beat South Carolina, but they have a 3-touchdown loss as recently as last week to Oklahoma. Miami should be 8-4. They're not a good football team. The ACC did some home cooking to them. And you have Ole Miss with that bad Kentucky loss. Florida loss was not a bad loss. The LSU loss, it turns out, was not a bad loss. The bad loss was that Kentucky loss. But every one of these 4 teams are extremely flawed. It is amazing that everybody is campaigning and trying to get their team in, which honestly is expected. But none of those teams are in that same group as the other 11 teams.
No, and, I know South Carolina won their rivalry game against Clemson. But Clemson is just not a very good football team. They're not a very good conference. They had 2 losses. Now they have 3. And South Carolina, they do have a good pass rush, but what was it, 27-3? We went into their house and beat them. And so I think Alabama lost the Oklahoma game almost as bad as if you combine all of our losses together in one game. And, by the way, Vandy beat them. Of course, the 6-6 Vandy State Aggie Doors, who are bowl eligible. The Fighting Diego Pavias. I was hoping they would take Tennessee out, but they didn't. By
the way, we'll talk about this. Nico Iamaleava had a playoff level drive in that game that put it away. An unbelievable thing. The thing that we were all talking about for several weeks, Nico actually did, and death marched the Vols down the field and separated that to the point where Tennessee was in control of that game and basically got them in the playoffs. They deserve it because of that. Texas deserves it because they beat somebody with a number besides their name.
Yeah. I mean, and we'll see what Texas does if they come back and beat Georgia in the championship game again. Mm-hmm. I don't remember who said it. Somebody else recently. It's hard to beat somebody twice in the same season. Mm-hmm. We'll see if Georgia owns them again, then maybe A&M shouldn't have had a number by their name when they beat them. Is that the only one with a number by their name that they beat?
That's the only team that Texas beat with a number beside their name is Texas A&M.
Yeah.
And they were 20th, so there's no guarantee that they're going to be in the poll this week.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's one thing, in Sark after the game, I saw him talking about, everybody warned us about the physicality of the SEC, and we did all this stuff, and we went out there and won this game against A&M. You beat A&M. Texas 8-4, as you call them. Mm-hmm. So, go be proud of yourself. If you come back and whoop Georgia in the championship game, okay. I can live with that because Georgia's a solid team. And the way Georgia's been playing lately, Texas will probably get up big in the first half, and Georgia will find some fairy dust to come back in the second half or something like that, like they did. They found some fairy dust against Georgia Tech. Anyway,
I'm gonna be honest. In the second half of that ball game, especially in the fourth quarter, it felt like a switch flip for Georgia. And everybody talks about how close it was and how it looked, but it doesn't really talk about how Georgia looked in the overtime periods at the end of the fourth quarter. It felt like a switch flip for Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, they were down for the count. That fourth down play where the pass interference occurred in the end zone, that gave Georgia life. If there's no pass interference there, if there's no flag, Georgia loses that game. There's no way they come back with the time they had left. But something happened. They scored that, and then it just went off. The Haynes King, who probably won't be able to walk until their bowl game after rushing the ball so many times. He got popped by what's that? Dan. The safety or linebacker.
Dan Jackson.
Yeah, Dan Jackson. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And the ball popped out, and Georgia got it back, and then scored. So just things kind of fell into place. But like you said, it did look kind of like a switch flipped, and they realized, hey, we're playing Georgia Tech. And I know Georgia Tech plays well, and their play calling, they had a former Georgia assistant calling the plays, who looked like he knew what he was doing, and you got help me out, Brett Key, that the teams, he seems to always have his team ready for those big games, so Georgia Tech played their tails off. They just got ousted in 8 overtimes.
Yeah,
by Georgia.
Although they're not real overtimes, it's like having a shootout. It's not what Ole Miss and Eli went through back in 2001 against
Arkansas. Matt Jones.
That's not what this is.
No. And
after 2 overtime, it becomes a shootout.
Yes, and it's just one play, and it's just like, oh my gosh, you had the A&M guy drop the ball against Auburn, or was it? Yeah, that was against Auburn the week before. And then you had some drop passes, you had some things going on in this game. So I mean, it was 8 overtimes, but like you said, it was not what we went through. What was our game? 17 or 20 at regulation, and ended up 50 something in that 7 overtime game.
Yeah, I think it might have been like 24-24.
Okay.
The play that I remember, other than Matt Jones just absolutely running crazy and running around and all that, there was a post pattern thrown by Eli Manning to Jamie Armstrong, and I will never forget that catch for whatever reason. I was watching that in my my dorm room, essentially my barracks room, in Willow Grove, Pennsylvania, when I was in the Navy. I will never forget that moment. But that overtime thing, good God, this might have been 8 overtimes, but it wasn't that. It didn't feel like that.
Yeah, it's not the same. It's not the same thing. And I mean, I get it. I know it's 8 overtimes and 9's the record, but in my mind, Ole Miss will always be tied with the real record of 7 real overtimes.
Well, I think Texas A&M and LSU went 8, and they changed the rules.
Oh, I thought they went 7 as well. I thought they tied us. So if they went one more, that's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah. They were 74-72 game. It was absolutely nuts. Yeah. Yeah, people are soft now. They're just soft.
That's right.
So basically getting back on the subject about the playoffs. Again, there's 11 teams in this playoff that nobody can doubt whether or not they deserve to be in it. And this is the conference champion and the at-larges that are sitting in there. And there's one spot that is going to go to a team that is outside of that realm. And that is the Alabama at 9-3 with a win over South Carolina and Georgia, and losses against Vanderbilt, a horrible loss against Oklahoma, and who else they lose to? They lost to somebody else, Vandy, somebody. Either way, they're 9-3. South Carolina got absolutely boat raced, embarrassed at home by Ole Miss. Alabama beat them the next week. LSU beat them. They're 9-3. So all 3 of those teams are 9-3. All 3 of those teams have the advantage over South Carolina as far as head-to-head, and the subjectivity goes between Alabama and Ole Miss. Miami, like I said, I just do not respect and think they're a very good football team, Josh.
No, I mean, they have the all-world quarterback Cam Ward, who's had to bail them out how many times this season already just to get to 9 wins. So as far as the team goes, they have trouble stopping people, and they had Syracuse on the ropes. Weren't they up 17 or 21-0 against Syracuse?
Yeah, and they just
Syracuse
collapsed.
comes storming back.
Yeah.
I think they said Syracuse has been playing football for 100-something years, and it was their biggest comeback in the school's history. I was watching it and thought it was awesome. And then how about all the flag planting this weekend? Holy cow. Melees and fights everywhere.
Listen, how in the world on this rivalry weekend, it was the Egg Bowl the only normal football game?
Exactly. I mean, it and it was closer than it was supposed to be, but still it didn't get as heated. There was a couple times where it could have got out of hand, but it didn't.
Yeah. But nothing strange, nothing weird happened at the end of that game. That was just a football game. It was an intense football game, but it was a football game. But you got Michigan players getting pepper sprayed by Ohio State police on a fight after the game. Everybody tried to fight after the game. You know what? If teams fought enough during the game to keep people out of the end zone, you wouldn't have to be fighting after the game to keep the other team from planting the flag on your field.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So coming up, we're going to continue to talk playoffs. We're going to talk a little bit of Egg Bowl maybe as well. We'll see exactly what's up with that. So stick around. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Currently, Georgia is a 2.5-point underdog to the Texas Longhorns in the state of Georgia and Atlanta for the SEC championship game. That makes me have all kinds of hunches about that game. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL or college football all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place those bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, we're back with Josh Guest from Commodore Media Group and Super Talk Mississippi. This playoff season, everybody's in full campaign mode. And we're going to hit your comments in the third segment, by the way, of the show. So be sure and post in your comments what you're thinking and also where you're commenting from so I can call that out as well because I'm genuinely interested in that. So, Josh, we talked about how weird of a rivalry day it was. All of that going on. Everybody tried to plant a flag and everybody tried to fight because a flag got planted. And people got pepper sprayed and the Egg Bowl was normal. And it was a weird rivalry day. Heck, you had Vandy go up 14-0 within 5 minutes of the football game. You thought something really weird could have happened in that ball game. All in all, the rivalry day is probably, other than the first day of the NCAA basketball tournament, it's probably my favorite day on the calendar.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun watching all the different stuff, and everybody says you can throw the records out. And I honestly, like for Michigan, I thought Michigan really didn't have much of a chance against Ohio State, and yet they come out on top, which I think is hilarious. It's just fun to watch all the different things. I was hoping Alabama-Auburn would be closer. I was hoping Vandy could hold on a little longer. Georgia Tech was a great game. It was fun to watch it and see it all as it unfolded.
Yeah, it was really interesting because the narrative surrounding college football this season, okay, the thing that, like, the overarching narrative through everything was that Ohio State was an elite football team. Oregon was #1 because they beat Ohio State by 1 point. Ohio State was an elite team. That means that Oregon had to be an elite team as well. And Ohio State almost beating Oregon was a big move. Then you have Penn State, who was viewed as an elite team because they narrowly lost to Ohio State. Indiana is in the playoffs because Ohio State may have beat them really bad, but Ohio State was an elite team. Everything in the Big Ten and the rankings is all surrounding the fact that Ohio State is an elite team. Now that Ohio State just had a Kentucky loss, because that's really what happened. I think Kentucky would give Michigan all they wanted on a neutral field, or heck, even in Ann Arbor. Texas absolutely went up there and embarrassed them. So let's not talk about how Michigan's the defending national championship and whatever you want to do to kind of further your agenda. The Big Ten, it's going to be interesting to see what the committee does, because that narrative has had 12 weeks to simmer, and now this conference just might not be good. It could be extremely top heavy with one or two teams. It could be just a very good conference to where everybody just talked about Oregon and Ohio State being good. It could be a situation that a 2-loss Georgia is the best team in the country.
Yeah, and Stephen, just running over scenarios and things like that. Whomever gets that 12 seed, I would love for it to be the Rebels, because I smell something like a Penn State 5, a Notre Dame 4 maybe, with Oregon sitting at number 1. Give me that draw all day, every year, whenever you want to, because you go to Happy Valley in the 5 seed and somebody's going to walk over them. And then if you play Notre Dame, I think you got a chance. And then Oregon again, are they really as good as the national narrative says they are? Because you beat a 2-loss Ohio State team who just got beat by Michigan. Oh, by the way, where was that game? Wasn't it Ohio State? Yeah. So Michigan goes on the road and wins in the Big House. No, the Big House is Michigan. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Horseshoe.
Columbus. Yeah, the Horseshoe. And sorry, I got them all mixed up. That's how much I pay attention to Big Ten football. And then then you got Oregon.
You don't have Peacock.
No, I mean I don't. I don't pay attention. So to the Notre Dame channel. But yeah, I mean I think whoever gets that 12 seed has as good a chance of meeting Texas in the finals as anybody else, because Texas should be the 2 if they beat Georgia. Of course, we don't know if that's going to happen or not. So anyway, just when I look at the most likely scenario, I'm thinking that something like that may happen in the end. I mean, who knows? SMU could be sitting there at 4, Boise State, but that doesn't bring any more fear. Notre Dame, none of that scares me as much.
And the Big Ten wanting Ole Miss out of this tournament is a real thing. They do not want to play a home game against the Ole Miss Rebels. They would much rather play Alabama, South Carolina, or Miami.
I was going to say that, Stephen. Let the other teams that are in the tournament, let the other 11 look at the 4 that are in the pod you talk about, and let them like put a secret camera on them and listen to who they don't want to play. I promise you, it's the Ole Miss Rebels. That's the last team they want to see.
You know what? They should have a play-in tournament. As Ole Miss, we should just agree to it over 2 weeks leading up to the thing, to where Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, and Miami, they play 2 games just each week, with the winners being the playoff play-in game for that number 12 seed. Ole Miss they would probably be the betting favorite in that game right now.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's roll with it. Play in like the 68 team, going down to 64.
Yeah. I would absolutely play any of those 3 teams. I don't know that Ole Miss fans would shy away from them. Those would be games, all 3 of them, Ole Miss would be favored in those football games.
Just have to show up and play. And if we show up with a bad game plan, could we possibly change it at halftime?
Seriously, that'd be nice, wouldn't it?
I'm sorry.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
That has been the biggest flaw of this Ole Miss football team, is when plan A doesn't work, it just seems like there's not a plan B.
Yeah, I mean, it baffles me. And look, I know I bash on the coaches, but it's just baffling to me how you can be at such a high level and what you planned didn't work, and you don't have a backup plan. Like I'm a nobody who advises students on their schedules and majors. And guess what? If you were my advisee in my entire career, we've had a backup plan. Because things don't always go the way that you think they're going to go. I'm okay with your plan being bad to start with, because you may plan one way and something may happen that may alter it. But you got to have some way to get out of it. And we just haven't shown the ability to adapt whatsoever.
And for anybody that's watching this and they're sitting there getting ready for their hot takes on Twitter or what's going on in the comment section, I am not saying that Ole Miss deserves just to be in the playoffs. I'm saying that Ole Miss deserves it more than Alabama, South Carolina, and Miami. If it's going to be a 4-team pod of those 4 teams of who deserves it more, yes, Ole Miss deserves that more. if you just look at 12 teams and what it looks like, there's 11 teams that absolutely deserve to be in the playoffs, and nobody should argue them either way. Even Indiana at this point deserves to be in. They've handled business. But for that 12th spot, that weirdness in the college football playoff that is potentially between Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, and Miami, no, I'm not going to capitulate on that one, Josh.
So, look, this is sorry, as you were going through that, who does Oregon play in their championship game? Do they have
Penn
one?
State. Penn State.
Oh, my goodness. So then Penn State won't be the 5 after they lose that game. If they may win it, who knows?
No, they'll probably be the 5. But Penn State in a ranked game with James Franklin as the coach, how many times have they won that over the last 10 years, even including the Peach Bowl last year?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they may go try to score a touchdown up by 31 or something. I don't know.
Yeah, they should. James Franklin was absolutely correct by that answer. The problem is for James Franklin is he doesn't get the benefit of the doubt because he has not won that big game yet.
Yeah.
If he could win one or two of those, people would lay off. Anyway, when we come back, we're going to get to your comments. It's the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the Reaction Roundtable with Josh Guest. Stick around. You know, there's nothing like the energy of being at a live game, the roar of the crowd, the sound of the sneakers squeaking across the court, and even spotting a few celebrities in the stands. I remember going to an NBA game a few years back, and the electricity in the arena was unforgettable. You cannot replicate watching that from your couch. This year, I'm looking forward to catching more games live, going over and seeing the Orlando Magic whenever stars come into town. And Game Time makes it easier than ever with their new Game Time Picks feature. Whether it's basketball, concerts, or theater, Game Time helps you find the best deals on great seats without the hassle of endless scrolling. I just hopped on the app to check out the tickets for the upcoming games, and Game Time Picks made it a breeze to find super deals and amazing seats. Plus, the app showed me a panoramic seat view, so I could pick the perfect spot with no guesswork, no surprises. It's not just for sports either. Game Time also has incredible deals for concerts and comedy shows. I'm planning to grab tickets to a concert next month. And with all-in pricing, I see exactly what I'll pay up front, no hidden fees at checkout. And what I love most about Game Time is their lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And with event cancellation protection, your tickets are covered as plans change. It's the most flexible ticketing app you have ever used. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that is code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time! All right, we are back on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the Reaction Roundtable with Josh Guest. The Egg Bowl was this past weekend. We're talking a lot of playoffs because today, Lane Kiffin is in full campaign mode, as he should be. That's to be expected. You can roll your eyes on it and all of that because Ole Miss does have massive flaws in their resume. But whenever you look at what they sit in, so do the teams that they're in the pod with. Alabama has major flaws on their resume. South Carolina has major league flaws on their resume, including losing to the 2 SEC teams they're tied with. And Miami is just not a very good football team. They don't deserve to be in there anyway. But Lane Kiffin he's in full campaign mode. He's having Twitter beefs with Brett Bielema of the Illinois Fighting Illini. He has a situation where he's basically quote tweeting everything he can find statistically about his team, which he should. He absolutely should, whether you want to eye roll or not. And believe me, there's a lot of these things that people are going to want to eye roll on, but he's doing his job. So it is what it is. Let's go to the comments real quick. We've got Dad talking about the 12th spot is up for grabs between Ole Miss, Miami, South Carolina, and possibly SMU, thanks to Miami and Clemson losses. SMU, I think, is in. I think if SMU is likely going to win the SEC championship, I think the last spot is Miami, South Carolina, Ole Miss, and Alabama for the last thing. Another question is, half of the Big Ten does not have a winning record, but they have 3 of the top 4 teams in college football playoffs. SEC championship pays ton of NIL money. Why should the SEC put up with the committee ignoring strength of schedule or strength of record? I mean, that's a legit question, but whenever you have 19 teams and 9 conference games, it's going to be very unbalanced, and this is going to be a problem. Dad says, root for UNLV, Texas, and SMU in conference championships. No, if you're an Ole Miss fan, root for Georgia. You want to have a victory over the SEC champion in your holster. That is the one way that you can improve your resume. Not necessarily over Alabama, but you can improve your resume with a bullet during championship week that others cannot absolutely do. And root for SMU because you don't want Clemson to give South Carolina that same thing.
Steven.
What's up?
So on the Texas-Georgia thing, you think Georgia's automatically in as an SEC loser with 3 losses, tied with Ole Miss, who beat Georgia? Is that what Dad's getting at, you think?
Yeah.
So you think Georgia's in over us?
Yeah, Georgia's in.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I just wondered. I mean, that's something that's been pontificated. We did that Friday in the Grove before the Egg Bowl. We were talking about that same scenario. And so I don't disagree with your point. I just wondered what you thought about the other.
Yeah, it's a situation. I think Georgia's in the field regardless. Whenever they like I said, they look pretty good in the overtime period. It's going to look like a close score, and everybody's going to talk about it. But they kind of turned it on at the end of that ball game and looked like a switch flip. Mason Palazzo says Ole Miss is literally the best 3-loss team. They beat South Carolina and Georgia far better than Alabama did. That is absolutely factual. Richard Eubanks, Josh, says Alabama doesn't need to be in it. It's a situation, and I talk about this tomorrow a little bit. Ole Miss isn't going to win a popularity contest with Alabama. Ask Florida State a year ago. If it comes down to Ole Miss and Alabama, Ole Miss is not winning that. It doesn't matter if they have better numbers. It doesn't matter if all of their metrics are superior. The brand and the logo is going to play so much of a role in Alabama getting into that field that there's not a lot that you can do about it. Michael Spetz, we have nobody to blame but ourselves. I use this term, but we choked. Michael, you are absolutely true, but whenever you look at the last 4 teams, everybody on that list choked. Alabama got ran out of the building against Oklahoma, which, by the way, they're 2-6 in the SEC, and Oklahoma absolutely just ran them out of the building. South Carolina got beat by 4 touchdowns by Ole Miss. And Miami, like I said, they should be 8-4. So you can say what you want to say, but that doesn't change the fact that the other teams that are in this competition did as well. If Ole Miss won those games, they're hosting a playoff game. They're in the SEC championship game. We're not having that conversation. Everybody knows the score there. We're talking about where Ole Miss sits in those 4 teams that all have extremely flawed resumes.
Steven, got a question. Alabama versus Ole Miss. I know we're not going to win the popularity contest.
No.
Money plays a big role in this. Do you think a starved Ole Miss fan base outspends an Alabama fan base for the 12 seed?
Outspends?
Or brings them more money for the committee in college football?
I don't know, because the ratings that Alabama that they get nationwide, Alabama gets a bigger number than Ole Miss.
Yeah.
So I don't know if in-stadium experience on 4,000 tickets or something like that is going to account for the TV audience.
Yeah, maybe not. I just go back to Omaha and how there was 26,000 people at the championship series against Oklahoma and 23,000 were Ole Miss, and that's a conservative number.
So. Travis Adair put out and said, Steve, will they just put a 2-loss team in the 12th spot to avoid the 3-loss team discussion? There is a real chance of that. There's a real chance that Miami gets that 12 spot just to avoid this Alabama, South Carolina, and Ole Miss discussion. That is a very real threat. And Miami's probably the worst of the 4 teams, but that 2-loss discussion, it is going to save a bunch of headaches for them down the road. Let's see, coming out there. We'll take one more. Cash the Real Saint says, Ole Miss beat South Carolina and Bama beat South Carolina, so South Carolina's out. Yeah, I do not see a team jumping 2 teams that beat them. All of the narrative that everybody's saying and all the games they're playing, that's all well and good. I do not see them jumping both of them. Miami has not looked good and has a weak strength of schedule, so they're out. So this is between Ole Miss and Bama. I would love to see who the committee would pick in a game. on the field, if you take the logos off and they just go to as FCS Southeast versus FCS Southwest on the football field where you couldn't tell which is which, they would probably pick the group of players that's Ole Miss if they didn't know. But I just genuinely think this logo is going to play a major role in this decision. I do not think that Ole Miss can win a popularity contest against the Alabama Crimson Tide this year. So anyway, all right. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching the show. Tune in tomorrow. We get more in depth on this, and I talk about why out of that pod of 4 teams, Ole Miss is actually the best team that the committee can select, and they are the most deserving of teams as well out of those 4 teams to get the playoff nod. We talk about that tomorrow. This week is all going to be recruiting and playoff of what's going on. Ole Miss is not likely to get in, but if you look at that pod, it's a flawed group of teams. And yeah, I'm not saying it's likely or anything like that, but Ole Miss probably should be at the top of that 4-team roster. But we'll talk about that tomorrow. Josh Guest, thank you for coming on the show tonight. What do you got going on this week, bud?
Well, been off for Thanksgiving, in the world of education, so headed back. And I'm also going to sit around and daydream about next year and how Austin Simmons is going to lead the Rebels to the playoffs next season.
Yes, Austin Simmons. I am very fired up about Austin Simmons' season. And I have been all season. I was probably the first person on Austin Simmons, as everybody that listens to the show can attest. And yes, I'm very excited about that as well. And if it is a bowl game, if Ole Miss does miss the playoffs, the bright side is Austin Simmons is probably starting that bowl game. And if that happens, everybody gets their first look at that young man.
Yeah, and real quick, Stephen, for Ole Miss fans our age, Dart gets hurt, throws a pick, Georgia scores, right? Mm-hmm. That's the most Ole Miss thing that could happen. Mm-hmm. Austin Simmons coming in, and the most Ole Miss thing that could happen is he then gets another turnover and Georgia's up 14-0. He did the most un-Ole Miss thing that could be done by driving us down and tying the game up as the backup who came in cold, against a top-tier team that, we can't win the big one, all those things. So, sorry, I'm a little excited about number 13.
Yeah. I am a huge Austin Simmons guy, but we have 8 months to talk about Austin Simmons, okay? We're going to talk about playoffs and recruiting this week, and as rumors that come in, we'll talk about them as well. Anyway, Josh, thank you very much, and we will talk to you later, and everybody, have a good Sunday night.